Shall we move on? Shall we start this webinar on oligopoly? All right. So how do we define an oligopoly? What are the characteristics of this market structure? So it is a market structure. It's always, remember, you should always start your definition by an oligopoly is and then a noun. So it's a market structure in which there are a few firms that hold a large market share and face many buyers. So actually in an oligopoly, you may very well have many firms. It's possible that you have 200 firms in an oligopoly. What matters is not how many firms you have in total. What matters is how the total market share is divided between firms. So for example, if you have, let's say 3 firms or 4 firms, and when you add their market shares, they have 80 or 90% of the total market share. And if you have then 200 smaller firms that have very, very small market share, 10% when you add all of that, we would say that the market is an oligopoly, okay? Even though there are 204 firms in this market, since you have just 4 of them who hold most of the market share, this would be considered as an oligopoly. So be careful. Sometimes you will see books in which they say that an oligopoly is a market in which there are a few firms. It's not precise. It's usually true, but it may be the case that there are a few big firms and many, many, many small firms, but this would still be an oligopoly. Don't forget to say that, so when we say a few firms hold a large market share, we give information about what happens on the supply side. Don't forget to give information on what happens on the demand side. It's important to mention that there are many buyers. If you have a few firms and let's say just a few buyers, we don't call that an oligopoly. We can call that the bilateral oligopoly. If you have a few firms and 1 buyer, we would call that an oligopsony. Okay, so it's important to mention what happens on the demand side as well. There are high barriers to entry. They are not prohibitive, as was the case in a monopoly. In a monopoly, it was impossible for anyone to enter. In an oligopoly, the barriers to entry tend to be high, which means that it is difficult, it is costly for new firms to break down those barriers to entry and to compete with the firms already in the market, but it is not impossible. And usually in an oligopolistic market, the reason for which there are high barriers to entry comes from the existence of substantial internal economies of scale, which basically means that the firms which are already in the market, they already have a large market share, they operate at a high scale of production, so they can benefit from substantial economies of scale. They can produce at a low average cost, which gives them a competitive advantage over the new firms who would try to break down the barriers to entry and enter the market. So this is usually why there are only a few firms. It is complicated for new businesses to enter and compete with the existing firms. Is there a limit to the number of companies in oligopoly that is considered few? No, not specifically. It has to be more than 1. So it could be from anywhere from 2. And then there is no clear limit. I don't know, to me, from 2 to 10, something like that. From 2 firms to minimum 2 firms, maximum 10 firms. But again, it depends on their market share. So there is no clear definition, but let's say if you see that you have 5 firms that have 80% of the market shares, you can definitely call that an oligopoly. If you have 12 firms who have 95% of the market share, you could still call that an oligopoly, even though In that case, the interdependence between firms is questionable. If you have 12 firms, if you have 11 competitors, you might not be able to take into account the strategy of your 11 competitors. So try to think about that. I would say anywhere between 2 and 10. Okay. It's not very precise, but that's easy to remember. And yes, a duopoly is an oligopoly, absolutely. A duopoly is an oligopoly where we, no, it's not different. An oligopoly, sorry, a duopoly is an oligopoly in which you have only 2 firms. 3 firms, you would call it a triopoly. 4 firms, probably a quadropoly. And then you can just build up or carry on. But yes, a duopoly is not different from an oligopoly. It's just an oligopoly in which you have only 2 firms. Then it's just a matter of definitions. So if some textbooks want to define an oligopoly as a market structure where you have at least 3 firms, why not? But I don't really see the point of using this weird definition. Yes. Yes, okay. Let me, yeah, I mentioned that 200 smaller companies could also be considered an oligopoly. Okay, let me illustrate that. So if you have, try to do it. Oh, sorry. My clicker is not working properly. Okay, let's say that this is our market, okay? And we have 1 big firm, 2 big firms, and oh, that's not what I wanted to do. 2 big firms and 3 big firms, okay? And then the rest would just be, I'll try to do that, and then many, many small firms, okay? I could represent 200 small dots like this. This would still be considered an oligopoly, even if there are 200 small dots. Because again, when you define an oligopoly, what really matters is not how many firms we have in total. It's about how the total market share is divided between these firms. And you see that if you add the market share of this firm, this one here, the market share of this one, and the market share of this one, you will have the majority of the market shares. I don't know, perhaps 80% or 90%, which means that you will have 3 firms, 3 oligopolists who own a vast majority of the market shares in the market, which, if you read the definition there, a few firms, you see, a few firms hold a large market share. This is how we should define an oligopoly, okay? So what else? What are the other characteristics in an oligopoly? Firms are price maker, of course. They have a market power, especially when I mean firms, I mean the large firms, okay? The ones who have a large market share. The small firms, they are not price maker, but these big firms who hold a large market share, they are price maker. They are sufficiently large to have an influence on the market equilibrium and on the market price. So for example, if you have one of these big firms who increase its level of production, this is going to have an influence on the equilibrium price. And if you have one firm that chooses to cut its production, for example, this will probably lead to an increase in the equilibrium price in the market. So they have a market power, they can influence the price. Again, the only market structure that we study in A2 where firms are price takers is perfect competition. In monopoly, in a monopolistic market, in an oligopolistic market, and in a monopolistically competitive market, firms are price makers. And what is interesting in an oligopoly, and this is why we study game theory and why we use game theory to compute the equilibrium, to identify the equilibrium, is that firms are interdependent. So interdependent, it means that, and this is what I write, the profit made by each oligopolist depends not only on what they do, on their own strategy. So it could be a quantity that they have to choose, could be a price that they have to charge, could be a location that they have to choose. There are different ways firms can compete. This could be depending on the amount of advertisement that they make. Again, very different types of strategies, but when firms are interdependent, their payoffs, which is their profit, depends on their strategies, but it also depends on the strategies chosen, implemented by the other firms in this market, by their competitors. So we say that the profit of each player, of each oligopolist, is determined by the strategy profile of all firms in the industry, which is different from what we had in the monopoly, for example. In a monopoly, of course, the profit made by the monopolist only depended on its strategy. And in perfect competition, same thing, because we were price takers, what I was doing as a very small company in perfect competition had no influence on the market price. I was price taker. And therefore, the other businesses, they didn't care about what my strategy was, because my strategy had no influence on the market price and therefore no influence on the profit of all the other businesses in perfect competition. So among all market structures that we study, the oligopoly is the only one in which there is interdependent strategic interaction between the firms in this industry. And I think that's it. Yes, these are the four main characteristics. So when your students define an oligopoly in an essay, you need to make sure that they don't forget anything, that they include all these characteristics. And this is a short comment about what I said earlier. The number of sellers might not be relevant to define an oligopoly, and that's what I explained. A market in which there are many firms would still be considered an oligopoly if a few of them hold a sufficiently large market share. Okay. All right, and of course, because there is strategic interdependence, when one business has to decide what it is going to do, what price, what quantity, how much to spend on marketing, on R&D, whatever, they have to anticipate what the reaction of their rivals is going to be, because again, their profit not only depends on their actions, but also on the actions of their rivals. Good. What else? How about product differentiation? When we are in an oligopolistic market, do all firms sell the same product or differentiated products? The answer is, could be both. In economics, there are different models of oligopolies. There are models of oligopolies in which all oligopolists sell the same product. They sell a standardized product, could be wheat, oil, something like that, some kind of a commodity, for example, a standardized commodity, gold. Or it could be what we call a differentiated oligopoly. So there are two different oligopolies. So it's different from what we had before. In perfect competition, all businesses sold the same product. In a monopoly market, well, there was one single business producing one single good, so there were no possibility to differentiate anything. And in monopolistic competition, I have not yet organized a webinar on monopolistic competition, but there is always product differentiation in monopolistic competition. In oligopoly, it could be both. Could be that all firms sell the same product. Then we say that it's a homogeneous oligopoly or standardized oligopoly. Or each firm can sell a slightly differentiated product. And we talk about a differentiated oligopoly. So it's important to keep this in mind. The industry output can be standardized or differentiated. And yeah, and that's to answer, I forgot who asked the question about that. Oops. Yeah, William, you see? This is what an oligopoly consisting of only two firms is a duopoly. Each firm is known as a duopolist. And as I said earlier, there are many ways in which oligopolists can compete. They can compete in quantity. which means that the strategy that they have to choose is a level of production. We call that Cournot competition. Cournot is the name of a French economist. They can compete in price. In this case, instead of choosing a quantity to produce, they have to choose at what price they will sell their product. It's a very aggressive type of competition. We call that Bertrand competition. But of course, there are many other possibilities. Like, as I said earlier, they can compete in marketing and advertisement. They can compete in research and development. They can compete in location. There is a model that is called the Hotling model, where firms have to choose their location. So in that case, the variable that they have to choose to maximize their profit is not a price, it's not a quantity, it's a place where they will locate their activity. So yeah, this is what I said. Their oligopolies can be modeled in many ways depending on how firms are going to interact. So this is what makes the study of oligopolies a bit complicated, because there are many different ways firms can compete with each other. Okay, and that's what I say. And another reason for which it is a bit difficult is that depending on how these firms are going to interact, we will have very different outcomes. For example, if we assume that firms compete in price, if we consider the model of Bertrand competition, the conclusion is that even though we only have very few firms, 2 firms, for example, they will compete very, very aggressively in such a way that they will charge a price equal to the marginal cost and they will make 0 profit, just like in perfect competition. But on the other hand, if you look like Cournot competition, where firms are assumed to compete in quantity, where they have to choose a level of output, in this case, competition is less aggressive. Firms will be able to charge a price above their marginal cost, and they will be able to make strictly positive economic profit. So again, the outcome, what we can predict, the outcome of an oligopolistic market really depends on how we model the strategic interactions between the rival businesses. Yes, that's what I say, that there may be cutthroat competition, which means very aggressive competition between businesses. And sometimes in other environments, when firms interact in another way, there can be cooperation between colluding firms. So competition is not aggressive at all, and firms are able to secure positive economic profit. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good example, William. Another example is usually oil, crude oil. The country, especially in the OPEC, even though it's a cartel, there is still incentives to compete. The stability of the collusive agreement might not always be perfect. So we had a recent example with Russia and Saudi Arabia that there was Saudi Arabia and Russia that deliberately increased their level of production of oil in order to keep the price of crude oil very low, to lead American shale oil companies to bankruptcy. Russia is a member of the OPEC, I believe, but I'm not sure. I believe Russia is a member of the OPEC. Should be, right? I'm not 100% sure about that, but I believe it is. I may be wrong. If you have some time to Google it, William, feel free to do it, so you can tell me if I'm right or not. But in any way, in the oil industry, it's a typical example of Cournot competition, where each country or business, they have to choose how much oil they will extract. So it's Cournot competition makes sense. For cell phone manufacturers like Apple or Samsung, Bertrand competition tends to be more realistic. What matters is the price. They have to decide at what price they will sell their smartphones. So depending on industries, quantity competition. Okay, Russia is not a member of the OPEC. Good to know. Thank you very much. So depending on the industry that we consider, there might be different variables that are relevant to understand how businesses will interact from a strategic perspective. So let's have a quick look at non-price competition, which may be a characteristic of oligopolistic markets, but again, not always. It's often the case simply because most oligopolies are differentiated oligopolies. It's not easy to find examples of oligopolistic markets in which all firms sell exactly the same product. And actually, I don't think it's possible, because even if you take a standardized product like gold, it is standardized. The simple fact that gold can be stored or produced in different locations make it differentiated. So even if the gold itself is exactly the same, the location where it is produced creates a difference between the product. Same thing for any commodity. It could be agricultural commodity, it could be minerals, doesn't matter. Even if the product itself is standardized, the location will contribute to differentiate the product. So most oligopolies are differentiated oligopolies, which means that different businesses are going to sell different products. And in that case, price is not the only relevant variable on which firms can compete. They can compete in price, of course, but they can use other ways to compete, to gain market share, to gain market power, to increase their ability to raise the price and eventually to make more profit. And let's give a general definition first of non-price competition, and then I'll give you some examples. So non-price competition, okay, first there is an introduction. In perfect competition, all firms sold the same product. Yeah, we know that. Firms could not differentiate their products in any way. We know that from perfect competition. So the consequence is that in perfect competition, we can only compete in price, because the price is the only thing that matters from the perspective of consumers. Consumers, they will always buy from the business, from the firm that charges the lowest price. And there is no way firms can differentiate their product. In an oligopoly, however, in a differentiated oligopoly, things are different. Firms may resort to non-price competition. So how do we find that? Non-price competition is simply a set of marketing strategies that allow firms to differentiate their products and gain a competitive advantage over their rivals. So the idea is to decrease the intensity of competition by making your product different, so you can target specific consumers, increase your market power on a specific market segment, and charge the higher price and make more profit. So how can we do that? Okay, so of course this might be costly, marketing expenses and all, market research, this may be costly, but this is expected to be worth it if the extra profit that we can make is greater than the extra cost that go along with these non-price competition marketing strategies. So what can we do? What can we do if we want to compete? What are the different ways that we can follow, the different routes that we can follow if we want to compete using something else than the price? There are actually many possibilities, and I have not listed them all. So I've just made a selection of what seemed the most relevant to me. But it is important to understand that non-price competition is multi-dimensional, which means that there are several dimensions that firms can use to compete using something else than price. First thing would be quality, obviously. We can differentiate our product from our competitors by producing a product of better quality, for example. That's a typical manner of achieving non-price competition. Of course, then you have the style and the design, the physical characteristics of your product to differentiate. Could be a packaging, could be the design of a phone, the design of a television, anything like that that make your product different, that have different physical characteristics. Could be innovation, could be that your product has a new feature. So not so long ago, You had these phones that you could unlock with your fingerprints. Yeah, this was an innovation, and a few years back there were only a very few smartphone manufacturers that could provide these type of phones. So this is one way you can achieve product differentiation. Location, as I said earlier, the location also matters. You can differentiate your product by selling it or producing it at a particular location. Remember that time and location are important characteristics of a product. It matters a lot. Could be advertising and brand image. You can spend a lot of money to create brand loyalty, to improve the brand, to build up the brand image of your product, to make your consumers more captive, to reduce the price elasticity of demand. CSR and CER. So CSR is the corporate social responsibility, and CER is the corporate environmental responsibility, which of course are related to the brand image. You know, you could have an advertisement that emphasizes how much your business care about protecting the environment, that you recycle, that you do not pollute, that you are aware of your greenhouse gas emissions and you take actions to reduce them. So that would be CER. CSR would be how much you care about your employees, that you, for example, you donate a fraction of your profit to charity. All that could be part of CSR, simply to improve. So it's related to your brand image. Actually, I don't think I should have separated this point from the previous one. These are ways you can improve your brand image and make your product different from the competitors. That's also non-price competition. Warranty and customer service. So same thing, this is related to quality. Okay, so you could see that as going along with quality. So for example, if we think of cars, you know that there is the Japanese brand Kia. I don't know how to pronounce that properly. That provides usually longer warranty than most other car manufacturers. I think they have a 7-year warranty on most of their models of cars, which is usually longer than for other constructors, for other manufacturers. Korean, thank you, not Japanese. Thank you, William. Korean company, absolutely. So that's one way. That's also one way you can achieve non-price competition. Thank you, William, for correcting all the mistakes I make today with Russia not being part of the OPEC and Kia not being a Japanese company, but a Korean company. Thank you very much. Opening hours could also be one way you can differentiate yourself. Yeah, simply if all your competitors, they're closed at 7 p.m. and you open until 9 p.m. It is one way to provide a differentiated service, customer service. Promotional expenditure, yes, absolutely. This could also be an example of non-price competition. It works. This would be advertising. You can see that as an example of advertising. But promotional expenditure, carefully, if you mean that if you cut the price, if you mean that you offer discounts, then this would be seen as price competition. Yeah, coupons would be price competition, I think. So it's a bit hybrid because it's part of marketing, but it's also a reduction in price. So I would not use this example because it is in between price and non-price competition. There is a marketing aspect when you do promotional expenditures, coupons and all, but it's also if you also offer discounts, it can be seen as a type of price competition. Okay, I think that's about it. So there are a few pricing strategies. Basically, this slide is there to introduce your students to 3 keywords. And they need to know what these keywords are because there are plenty of MCQs about that. The first pricing strategy that your students must know is what we call limit pricing. Limit pricing is simply a situation where you have an incumbent firm. An incumbent firm is a firm that is already in the market, okay? So it's a situation where you have a firm in the market who charges a low price, who cuts the price, charges a very low price in order to make sure that new entrants or potential entrants choose not to enter. The idea here is that the firms outside the market, when they consider whether or not to break down the barriers to entry and to enter the market, they want to make sure that entering the market is going to be profitable. So what they do is that they look at the price in the market and they use this information to determine whether or not entering in the market will be profitable. So if they see that the price in the market is very high, then they will have a strong incentive to enter the market because they anticipate that with this high price, they will be able to make profit. But if they see that the price in the market is very low, artificially low, but they don't know that, if they just see that the price is low, they might just conclude that it is not profitable to enter this market. It will be costly to enter. We have to break down the barriers to entry. There might be a high startup cost and the price is very low. I will not be able to sell my product at a high price. So I will not be able to make a lot of profit. So basically, when you have a firm in the market who knows that there are other firms outside the market who are considering entering, that they might become new competitors, the firms inside the market, they might cut the price, lower the price in order to deter potential entrants from entering the market. So when you think about that, you can actually connect this strategy to the concept of dynamic efficiency. The firms inside the market, when they implement limit pricing, they sacrifice profit today. They cut the price, so they usually make lower profit today, so it's a cost for them. They lose some profit. But in the long run, they will benefit from implementing this strategy because once successful, once the entry has been prevented, avoided, then they will face a weaker competition, a lower competition in the future because nobody has entered, and they will be able to raise the price again and to make more profit. So limit pricing is a strategy that is costly in the short run. We lose profit today, but because it is one way to make sure that we will not face strong or high competition in the future, it is profitable in the long run. So I think it's interesting to connect that with the concept of dynamic efficiency. The incumbent firm is not necessarily the leader. It just means that it is a firm that is already in the market, as opposed to a potential entrant who is still outside the market. So there might be several incumbent firms. If you have 5 or 6 firms that are already active, producing in the market, you would say that there are 4 or 5 incumbent firms. There is another strategy, another pricing strategy that is very similar to limit pricing, which is predatory pricing. Predatory pricing is also a strategy in which businesses in a market will charge a very, very, very low price. But the objective is not the same. In limit pricing, we charge a low price to make sure that the firms outside the market, they will choose not to enter. So it's one way to prevent entries into your market. Predatory pricing, and the term predatory is quite explicit. Predators, what do? They kill. Predatory pricing is aimed at killing your existing competitors. So you are in a market with other firms. For example, there are 4 firms in your market that are already in your market. You charge a low price to kill them, to lead them to bankruptcy. So they will have to exit the market. And once they have exited the market, you will be able to raise the price again, and you will not face competition anymore. So of course, predatory pricing is likely to be successful if your cost of production is lower than your competitors. Because if you want to kill your competitors, you need to be able to charge a price or to survive when charging a very, very low price. In particular, the price that you charge should be lower than the average total cost of your competitors. Otherwise, they will be able to survive, which means that the minimum of your average total cost should be lower than the minimum of your rivals' average total cost. So you see, in both cases, the objective is to reduce competition in the future. Limit pricing, we want to prevent entry into the market. Predatory pricing, we want to kill the competitors already in the market. So same strategy, we charge a low price, but different objective. Kill versus prevent an entry. And the last keyword is price war. So that's a keyword that the students must know. So not much to say about that. A price war is simply a situation in which several firms in the market repeatedly lower their prices to outcompete their rivals and gain or defend market share. Okay, so if we have two firms, and this is exactly what happens in Bertrand competition. So firm A will say $10, firm B will say 9.9, 9.8, 9.7, and they will repeatedly lower the price in order to gain or defend their market shares. That's what we call a price war. And of course, it's usually very costly for businesses when they are engaged in such price war. And that's why we will see that they might have an incentive to collude, to engage in collusion in order to avoid these price wars that are very costly for all of them. Yeah, so I wrote that price wars typically occur in markets where non-price competition is weak or where firms find it difficult to collude. If they could collude, they would probably have an incentive to do so, to avoid the losses that might arise when firms are engaged in price wars. Okay, good. Right, what time is it? 47. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about, I'll start talking about collusion today, and I'll finish that tomorrow. And I'll talk about the kinked demand curve model. Before we talk about collusion, do you have any questions or any remark, anything else you'd like to say before we talk about collusion a bit? Is this okay? Can we move on? All right. Good. So when you are in an oligopoly, if you are a firm, a business operating in an oligopolistic market, there is a constant tension. If I can move this, just a sec. There is a constant tension within an individual firm as whether to collude with its rival. We call that a cooperative behavior, or to compete with its rival. We call that a non-cooperative behavior. And when we use game theory, the equilibrium, the Nash equilibrium that we find is always a non-cooperative equilibrium. In A2, we don't study cooperative game theory. We only study non-cooperative game theory when they actually compete. Everyone just tries to maximize its own payoff, its own profit. So what do we call collusion? It's very important that your students are able to define that properly. Collusion is simply an anti-competitive behavior that takes place when rival firms enter into an agreement that restricts competition in order to increase their joint profit. So it's important to, when you define collusion, it's important to explain what it is and what is the objective. Okay, the objective eventually is to increase their joint profit. So the joint profit is the total profit of the firms in the industry. Okay, so the profit that they make all together. This is what we call the joint profit. So competing is not great for them, because especially if we take the example of price competition, this might lead to a very low price if they compete very aggressively. And in this case, they will not be able to make much profit. Or even if they choose non-price competition, this might be very costly. They might have to spend a lot of money in advertising or promotional campaigns and all. So competition is usually just costly for firms. It costs money. This might lead to lower profit when they compete. So that's why they have an incentive to say, hey, wait, why do we fight? If we don't fight, if we agree not to fight, we will be able to charge a higher price, to reduce our marketing expenses, and at the end of the day, to make more profit. Why not? So let's have a look at that. Is it good for consumers, by the way? Is collusion good for consumers? Usually no. Usually no, because without competition, firms will be able to charge a higher price to sell a lower quantity. And with a higher price and a lower quantity, consumer surplus is going to be lower. So usually collusion is not something that is considered beneficial to consumers. But there is one argument that we could use to argue that collusion can actually benefit consumers, especially in the long run. The idea is, just like price discrimination, is that since firms who collude are able to make more profit, they might be able to invest more in research and development. They might have the financial ability to invest in R&D and to introduce process innovation that will enable them to produce at a lower cost, and this might lead to lower prices in the future, or to introduce product innovation, product of better qualities, product with new features that may eventually benefit consumers. This is the same idea as when we talked about monopoly. One advantage of a monopoly is that with long-term positive economic profit, they have a stronger ability to invest in research and development and to improve the technology or the products that are available to consumers. So this is the objective of this nota bene remark that you have at the bottom of this slide. There might be some benefits, but usually we consider that this is bad for consumers due to the higher price that results from collusion. Okay, let's have a look. Could too tough competition kill the whole market in a city? If that's the case, isn't collusion good? I don't know. Honestly, it's a good question. Can it kill the whole market? I have the feeling that there would still always be at least one business that survives. Maybe that is in bad shape. But I don't know any example. I don't have any example in mind of competition that was so tough that the entire market just died. It seems possible, but at the moment, I can't think of a good way to answer your question, William. I don't know. But I understand your point, yeah. It's possible that if competition is too aggressive, firms might make zero profit, zero investment. They may have to offer lower wages or to get rid of some workers. So at the scale of a city, this might lead to local unemployment. They have to cut costs. This might lead to a decrease in the quality of the product, because same thing, we have to cut costs. So it's not going to kill the market, but this might have consequences in terms of the quality of the product, in terms of the level of employment, especially if this is in a very localized area. So in this case, yes, collusion could be one way to make sure that the quality of the product remains high, to protect the employment of workers in that particular area. Yeah, that what comes to my mind when I see your question. Perhaps if other participants want to add something or have other ideas, feel free to share them. That's what comes to my mind at the moment. So let's have a look at, and I think I will just conclude today's webinar on this game. Let's have a look at a collusion game. So I'm going to use the easiest possible game in which we only have two firms, two businesses. So we are in a duopoly, firm A and firm B. So N is the set of players, player A or firm A and firm B. Each firm has only two strategies. Each firm can either charge a high price, H is for high price, or a low price, L is for low price. So SA is the strategy set for firm A, and SB is the strategy set for firm B, and each of them has the exact same choice. They can implement the exact same strategy, so that's why the two sets are equal. And now I have the set of payoffs, which is the profit. So these numbers could be in millions of dollars. Okay, you could say that 4 is $4 million. So if they both charge a high price, so this is the profit, U, it's for utility, but you can replace by capital pi for profit if you want. It's just the payoff. So the profit of firm I, so it could be firm A or firm B, if it charges a high price, so that's the first H, while its rival charges a high price as well. Okay, so the first H is my strategy, and the second H is the strategy of my competitor. Then in this case, we both have a high price. It's the same price, so we have 50-50% market share. And since it's a high price, we can make a lot of profit. So let's say $4 million. If we both charge a low price, LL is a situation where we both charge a low price. Well, in this case, we still have 50-50% market share, but now that the price is lower, we make less profit. So careful with something. You could argue that, yeah, okay, there is a lower price, but if there is a lower price, and even if we still have 50-50% market share, the quantity demanded will be greater because the price is lower. So we might make more profit. So basically in this game, we assume that demand is relatively price inelastic. Okay, that's the underlying assumption in this case. We make less profit if we both charge a low price than if we both charge a high price. But in both cases, we assume that you have a 50-50% market share simply because both firms charge the same price. Now, what is more interesting is what happens when we choose different strategies. What happens when I charge a high price, H, and my competitor charges a low price? So in this case, assuming that we sell the exact same product, so this would be a homogeneous oligopoly, a standardized product. If my competitor charges a price that is lower than mine, I will not be able to sell anything. I will have a 0% market share. I will not sell anything. And my competitor is going to have a 100% market share. In this case, I assume that my profit is 0. So I don't sell anything. Could actually be negative if I had fixed costs, right? So having 0 here suggests that there are no fixed costs. I don't sell anything. I only have variable costs, or you could say that this is a long run game where there is no fixed cost if you want. What if it's what if we do the opposite? What if I charge, oh, sorry, it's a mistake. Let me correct it. What if I charge a low price? Let me correct it right now. Yeah. That's the problem when I copy and paste. What if I charge a low price and my competitor charges a high price? So that's the opposite. I get 100% market share. And even though I charge a low price, because I face the entire market, everyone purchases from me, I can make a high profit, $6 million. So this is a very standard collusion game where you see, and we'll see that when we represent the matrix, that each firm has an incentive to charge a low price. And this is a typical example of the prisoner's dilemma. So let's represent this game with this payoff matrix. So we have firm A and firm B, our two players. Each row represents a strategy for firm A, and each column represents a strategy for firm B. So they have the same strategies, high price, low price, and we have 4 possible combinations of strategies, high, high, low, 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 high, and high, low. So the first sale is when they both charge the high price. So the first figure is the profit for firm A, and the second figure is the profit for firm B. Okay, same thing for all sales. So now that we have represented this matrix, this payoff matrix, let's try to solve the game. So there are several ways you can do that. I'm going to show you. The easiest one perhaps is to look for the Nash equilibrium of that game. So what we do to find the Nash equilibrium is to look for the best responses. So in order to find the best responses, I put myself in the shoes of one player. So for example, I say, okay, I am firm A. I believe that firm B is going to charge a high price. What should I do? Should I charge a high price and get $4 million, or charge a low price and get $6 million? Of course, the answer is I should charge a low price and get $6 million. So I circle this payoff. I am firm A, and I believe firm B is going to charge a low price. What should I do? Charge a high price and get $0, or charge a low price and get $2 million. Of course, getting $2 million is better than 0. And then once I have circled the best responses for firm A, I do the same thing with firm B. So now I put myself in the shoes of firm B, and I say, if I believe that firm A is going to charge a high price, what should I do? Charge a high price myself and get $4 million, or charge a low price and get $6 million? Obviously, charging a low price is better. So I can circle 6, what I get when I charge a low price. And finally, I am firm B. I believe firm A is going to charge a low price. What should I do? Charge a high price and get 0, or charge a low price and get 2. I should charge a low price and get $2 million. And you see that this cell that we have here, there is something interesting about this cell, is that I have circled the 2 figures. Simply put, it means that it is a Nash equilibrium. More precisely speaking, it means that when both firms charge a low price, none of them has an incentive to change its strategy. We see that if we start from this situation where both firms charge a low price, firm A doesn't have an incentive to change its strategy. If it changes from low price to high price, I have some issues with my touchpad. If firm A changes its strategy, it would get from $2 million to $0 million. Okay, so it's not a good idea. So firm A will not change its strategy. And same thing for firm B. If we start from this combination of strategies where both firms charge a low price, if firm B decides to change its strategy, to move from low price to high price, then its profit would go down from $2 million to $0 million. So again, it is not a good idea. So that's why we say it's an equilibrium. It's an equilibrium because no firm has an incentive to change its strategy. So this is how we can solve the game using the Nash equilibrium criterion. We could have also used the dominant strategy argument, just saying that if you look at firm A, strategy L is always better than strategy H. We say that strategy L strictly dominates strategy H. You see, 6 is better than 4. and 2 is better than 0. So it doesn't matter what firm B is going to play. We are always better off playing or charging a low price. So firm A will never charge a high price. This would be stupid, right? Firm A will always play its dominant strategy. And the same thing goes with firm B. For firm B, charging a low price is always better than charging a high price. 6 is better than 4. If I can represent it. And 2 is better than 0. So same thing, it doesn't matter. It's very annoying, sorry. It doesn't matter what firm A is going to play. It's always better for firm L to charge a low price. Firm B will never charge a high price. So we can say that for firm B, charging a low price is a dominant strategy. And it will always charge a low price. And we will end up with the same equilibrium where both firms charge a low price. This is what we call the non-cooperative equilibrium. Let me move on a bit to show you what comes next. Yeah. This is the non-cooperative equilibrium. Yeah. For both firms, charging a low price is a strictly dominant strategy. The strategy profile LL, low price, is a strictly dominant strategy equilibrium. And it is also a Nash equilibrium. So this is what firms will do when they don't cooperate, or if they don't have the possibility to talk or to agree before they actually have to choose what strategy they will play. But you see that it's this outcome, this non-cooperative outcome is not great in terms of how much profit they can make collectively. I think we would all agree that this outcome, the outcome in which they both charge a high price, is much better. Altogether, they make a profit of $8 million instead of $4 million. So if they could find a way to move from this non-cooperative equilibrium to this, let me go back, to this cooperative equilibrium, the one in which they all charge a high price, they would both increase their profit. But can we do that? No, because when we start, if we assume that firms agree to charge a high price, each of them, and this is what I write here, each of them has an incentive to deviate from the cooperative equilibrium, to charge a low price rather than a high price. Think about it. And I will stop here. Think about a situation where you organize a meeting with firm B. You are firm A, and you organize a meeting with firm B. So you are in a fancy restaurant and you say, hey, you know what, firm B, we shouldn't keep fighting like that. Why do we charge a low price? You know what we should do? Tomorrow, let's charge a high price. Yeah, if we both charge a high price, we can make $8 million together. Each of us can double our profit. Let's do that, okay? And something important, we will only play tomorrow, okay? And then the game finishes. We will not play in the future again, because if we play in the future again, it will be different. So let's just say that we play the game once. So we agree, we shake hands, we are very happy, we have a cup of champagne, and we agree that tomorrow we will charge a high price. Okay. The next day, I am firm A and I have to say, okay, so I said to firm B that I'm going to charge a high price, and I expect that firm B is going to charge a high price. So if I think that firm B is going to charge a high price as we agreed yesterday, what should I do? Should I really charge a high price myself? You see that I should charge a low price. I could get even more money if I cheated, if I deviate from what we agreed, if I charge a low price, even though we agreed to charge a high price. And what do you think firm B is thinking? Exactly the same thing. Firm B anticipates that you are going to charge a high price because this is what you agreed yesterday. And it can anticipate, it will think that, hey, if I charge a low price instead of a high price, I can get 6 rather than 4. So it's even better. So you see that this cooperative equilibrium, this agreement that we had yesterday in the restaurant, is not stable because each firm has an incentive to cheat. If we play the game only once, there is no way we will stick to this agreement. The only way, but this is beyond the scope of the A2 syllabus, the only way we can sustain cooperative equilibria in this type of competitive environment is if businesses interact in a repetitive way. Simply because if I cheat today, I can be punished tomorrow. And the fear of being punished might be sufficient to make me stick to the agreement that we had yesterday. So it's really the stick and the carrot. If you don't have the possibility to punish your opponents, your rivals, if they cheat, then you know that they will never stick to the agreement that you had. You get it? So this is a typical example of the prisoner's dilemma, in which we see that the outcome, high price is best for everyone, but it is not stable because each firm has an incentive to deviate, to cheat, and to deviate from this agreement, from this cooperative equilibrium. And we end up in a situation that is not good for anyone because both firms will make a low profit, only $2 million each, whereas they could have made $4 million. Okay. And I'm going to stop here for today. It's already been over an hour. Thank you very much for joining and staying if you are still there. Do you have any questions, any remark before we wrap this up? Is this clear? I haven't taught this in a while, so I'm a bit rusty on that, but I hope it was okay. All right. So I'm not sure, I don't know if I'll be able to do the part B tomorrow. I hope I'll be able to do it, but very soon anyway. So if it's not tomorrow, it's going to be in just a few days. And once we are done with oligopoly, we will be able to go through the last market structure, which is monopolistic competition. It's not very complicated. So we'll do that. And then I don't know, then I don't know, I might actually move on and talk about market failures and government intervention, or perhaps consumer equilibrium. This has not been decided yet, but I will keep you posted. Thank you everyone, have a nice evening and see you soon. Bye-bye.